Okay, so what you're watching right now is a video of Tony Award winner Alan Cumming performing his iconic role as the Emcee in Cabaret. Cumming has quite a bit of history with this role. This character came to life in a Sam Mendes directed production in the 90s in London before transferring over to Broadway. Or I mean, the character has always been in the show, but this particular version of the character. We'll get there. It was later restaged for Broadway in 2014 with Cumming reprising the role. And the Sam Mendes-Alan Cumming pairing has long been considered a very pivotal and visionary moment for the history of the show Cabaret. Cabaret is much older than this production though, with the first iteration of the show appearing in the 60s. Cabaret is inherently a project that lends itself to being revived and reinterpreted. If you are completely unfamiliar, the musical is about a seedy nightclub in 1930s Berlin called the Kit Kat Club. Spoilers, I guess, but during this time period, the Nazis take power. And so as you're following the relationships and the journeys of these characters, you're slowly seeing aspects of the Nazi government creeping into the plot. We'll get into more specifics, but the whole general motif here is that the patrons of the Kit Kat Club are able to engage in their hedonistic desires while turning a blind eye to the evils of the world. For example, there is a moment in the show where Sally Bowles, a performer at the Kit Kat Club, proclaims that what's happening around them is all just politics, and that all of it has nothing to do with who they are and the life that they're living. It's a fun party until it isn't. And the party has marched back onto Broadway in the year 2024, with a new revival of Cabaret premiering at the August Wilson Theater here in New York City. Now, this revival was originally brought over from the West End, where it did get pretty favorable reviews, and since it premiered here, the reviews have been pretty mixed, which, is nothing new for a Broadway revival. However, last weekend, a number from the show was performed at the Tony Awards, and people are having very mixed reactions to Eddie Redmayne's performance as the Emcee. So let's talk about it.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Friend, étranger, stranger.
Obviously, I can't play the full Tony Awards clip because of copyright reasons. It is up on YouTube if you want to go look up the full performance. But here is a summation of the discourse surrounding this performance. There are people who are weirded out by it, who don't know what Cabaret is, and there are people who do know what Cabaret is, and they dislike the performance for the artistic choices that Eddie and the team are making here. And for reasons that I'll get into, those are all being lumped into the same group of people, even though it's very clearly two distinct camps of people with two different kinds of opinions. Let's get the easier one out of the way first. Surely there are people who don't follow Broadway as closely as the rest of us nerds, who see this performance out of context on social media, and they go, "That's weird and off-putting. Why does he sound like that? I don't like that. Isn't Cabaret supposed to be the fun, sexy show?" And they're probably thinking of Moulin Rouge or Chicago. And while I don't see many people online with that opinion, I think that vocal minority inspired people who are really passionate about the show to explain why they think Redmayne's performance is good. Why they think the artistic choices here work. Because there are fundamental differences between Eddie's portrayal of the Emcee and Alan Cumming's portrayal. And you can see them here. I'll highlight them specifically in a second. But then you have this other group that does understand Cabaret that's getting frustrated because they get what Redmayne is trying to do here, they just don't like it. But they're getting drowned out by people on social media insisting that it's because they don't understand the subject matter. So let's talk about the difference in portrayals here and why this performance is so polarizing. From what I understand, Eddie Redmayne's performance is actually similar to some of the older productions of Cabaret, pre-Sam Mendes, pre-Alan Cumming, wherein that the Emcee is meant to represent the social structure and cultural changes of Berlin as the plot progresses. Eddie really decides to play that up here in his performance by acting sort of like a marionette, as if he's being puppeted and controlled. An example that people keep pointing to is the fact that he positions his arms to appear as a swastika, which foreshadows events later in the show. A lot of people don't like this because it's not very subtle. A big draw of Cabaret is that in Act 1, you as an audience member are supposed to be lured in by the glitz and glamour and intrigue of the club, only to be surprised later on when things get more sinister. And people think that Eddie's performance here in this moment is giving away the cards, so to speak. Contrast this with Alan Cumming's performance, who is a little bit more sexual in nature. His character is very promiscuous and fluid, and he starts the opening number being very alluring and charismatic. In that production of the show, the Emcee isn't a representation of a changing Berlin, but a representation of marginalized groups of people being victimized over the time period of the Nazis' rise to power. This is solidified in the final act of that production, where the Emcee takes off his coat to reveal a death camp uniform. On that uniform are patches representing Jews with the yellow badge, a red star marking communists and socialists, and a pink triangle which represents queer people. The twist here being that over the course of the show, the Emcee is forced to perform for an increasing audience of Nazis until they ultimately decide to execute him. This is a commonly known ending of Sam Mendes' production of Cabaret and was used in the 2014 revival. And you might argue that people are unfairly judging Eddie Redmayne's performance of the opening number without having seen a lot of what the 2024 revival's ending and progression has to offer. And that is where I come in. Okay, I think I've said this in another video before, but I walk by the August Wilson Theater every day on my way to work, and I have been wanting to see this production of Cabaret for quite some time. The issue, and this goes into a separate criticism of this Cabaret production, is that it's really fucking expensive. The reason why I got to go this week is because I offhandedly decided to check ticket prices, and I saw that mezzanine seats that are normally $300 for a Thursday night show were $140 each. And I was like, okay, that means somebody is probably off. And I was right. Gail Rankin, who plays Sally Bowles in this production, was off for the night, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to see Eddie. So Brian and I decided to take the plunge and head on over to the Kit Kat Club.
Is this where they sell the Kit Kats?
I'm gonna kill you.
Oh.
So our show was at 7:30, but the pre-show starts at 6:30, and we got there at around 7. The whole draw of this 2024 revival is that it's supposed to be an immersive experience. And so in the time before the show starts that you're in the Kit Kat Club, you're supposed to explore, interact with the pre-show performers. There's a bunch of bars on all different floors that you can order from. And I should also mention that that red tunnel leading into the entrance to the theater is pretty much all that they let you film, because once they scan your ticket, they give you a sticker to put on the back camera of your phone to prevent you from taking pictures and videos of the inside of the club. I will say that is a rule that you can avoid, but I did not out of respect for the performers and the venue. The pre-show was a pretty cool element. You got to walk around and sort of see different performers in their element. It was a little disorienting because it is, loud, and there are a lot of people, at least there were at our show, so it can get very overwhelming. Also, they gave us a shot at the front door. It tasted like Robitussin. I did not like it very much, but that's okay. As far as the immersive seating, they transformed the August Wilson Theater to sort of have the small circular stage in the middle. I'm actually very surprised at, the transformation job that they did with it, because I've been in that theater before and they had to do a whole lot of heavy lifting, it seems, to make this whole thing work, which I'm sure is part of the reason for the very pricey tickets to this thing. I also will say that my experience is pretty different from the folks who got tickets actually on the ground by the stage, because there were more opportunities for performance interaction. We were up on the mezzanine, so we were kind of suspended above the action. Although I will say it wasn't a bad seat at all. We were technically in the back of the stage, but the performers did kind of perform to both sides of the venue equally, so it wasn't that big of a deal. This is also another show with a turntable. Broadway is in the pocket of big turntable and nobody's talking about it. Anyway, now that I've seen the whole show front to back, I thought it was pretty good. This was my first time seeing a stage production of Cabaret, so my mind was pretty open in that regard. But yeah, I enjoyed Eddie Redmayne's performance. It did not feel out of place to me at all. Obviously, I didn't see Gail Rankin as Sally Bowles, but I do want to give a shout out to the understudy for Sally, Paige Smallwood. She was amazing. She was so good. I'm glad I got to see her. But yeah, all of the performances in here were really solid. I think the biggest difference here is the ending, especially versus the Alan Cumming, Sam Mendes version. Basically, they do a lot of the fascism creeping in metaphor with clothing. So like at the beginning of the show, everybody's wearing what you saw in that Tony's performance. It's very lewd, half naked, very colorful. And then as the show progresses, you'll notice that more and more people in the cast start donning these brown blazer type looks. And the Emcee transforms from this sort of out of place weirdo into like this very uptight Nazi-esque image. The hair goes from red to blonde, and he's much more uptight in how he's presented. The show ends with all of the characters donning these suits and this very similar stoic kind of appearance, and from what I understand, this is basically meant to represent both the loss of queerness and individuality and self-expression under the guise of a fascist regime. I think narratively, I like the Sam Mendes, Alan Cumming production ending a little bit better, but I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with how this one is presented. I've also seen the complaint that the main character Cliff gets sidelined a bit. He's the main character and all the focus is being put on Eddie Redmayne as the Emcee, but I also feel like that's kind of the case with the Alan Cumming production as well. I still think that Cliff had enough to do even though he's not as much at the forefront as Sally Bowles and the Emcee are. But yeah, I saw it and I thought it was pretty good. If you like the musical Cabaret, I think you'll like this. But now I want to get into some of the more valid points that people are actually criticizing, and I don't think it's as much about the show itself, rather more like the circumstances and time that this show is being produced in, and how that compares to previous iterations. Like I said, the message of Cabaret truly does persist no matter what decade it's performed in. It kind of transcends time, because domestically, internationally, the rise of fascism and turning a blind eye to atrocities seems to be a looming narrative and has been for quite some time. So some people have pointed out the irony about the fact that a musical with such an important message like Cabaret is being gatekept by these insanely high ticket prices, and the people getting the best experience are the ones who pay for the up-close and personal immersive aspects close to the stage. And for a show that focuses so much on the immersion, there really is no moment where the mirror gets turned on the audience. So for example, I've read about productions of Cabaret where it's the same kind of thing. The audience is meant to be in the Kit Kat Club, but a literal mirror is reflected back at them to show how they could potentially be complicit. It's a small detail, it's one that might not matter to you, but I will say there is a point where, you know, after the first act and you find out that a lot of these people on stage are slowly buying into Nazi ideology, like the reveal has already come to fruition, and then at the beginning of the next act there are cast members pulling people from the audience up on stage to dance. And it's, you know, definitely the people who paid the most money to be there who get that experience. And I'm not hating on them, I don't know their personal circumstances. For all I know, they blackmailed Eddie Redmayne for the tickets, I have no fucking idea. But I understand how this can be interpreted as, look at these rich people partying with the Nazis, which seems like grounds for poignant commentary in a modern day 2024, but the show doesn't go anywhere new with that. So a common critique that I've been seeing is that if you're reviving Cabaret, you should really have something new to say. And this production is kind of like what's in the text. And I personally don't think it's bad. Like, I watched it and I was like, this is a pretty solid production of Cabaret, but I understand why actual fans of the musical are wanting more. And that brings me to my last point. We should let people like and dislike stuff. This is gonna seem like it's coming from out of left field, but let me cook for a sec. Today I saw a tweet that was commenting on a cover that Sabrina Carpenter did of Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan, and it said something to the effect of, oh my god, she's the new Kelly Clarkson, every cover that she does of other people's songs is better than the original. And like, that's not a take that I personally agree with, and it's probably not even a take that they agree with. It's probably bait. But then there were a billion people who quote tweeted that, and they were like, oh my god, Sabrina Carpenter should never cover a song ever again. Why are people acting like this is good? She took all of the emotion out of the song. Just because this one person made like a hyper exaggerated bait tweet. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I feel about Cabaret at the end of the day. Just because people are tweeting that they don't like Eddie Redmayne's portrayal of the Emcee, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't understand it or that they don't understand any of what Cabaret is about. And similarly, I don't think people who enjoy this version of the musical are easily impressionable dummies who don't know good art. Things can be good, and things can be bad. You don't have to prove that another person's opinion is morally wrong just because we disagree with it. You can just disagree and support the art that you like instead. Objectively, I know one thing to be true. There was a cabaret, and there was a master of ceremonies, and there was a city called Berlin in a country called Germany. And well, you know the rest.
Life is